So this is going to be the colors built based on the note points. Okay, so then what bucket are we in? These are the majors. They all land in the bucket of the major, just like we would expect. That's the cleanest one we're going to see. So let's say we go up to then the Lydian. So if we go up to the Lydian, now we're going to say that we start with an F major. Now the F major is not going to tell me where we are. Is it an Ionian? Is it a Lydian? Is it a Mixolydian? F, right? We don't really know by just the F. So I'd rather drop the F and say it by relative position, the Lydian, meaning call it a 3-note Lydian chord, for example, or a Lydian F2 modal whole step. But the F is redundant if we know the collection of notes. I'd rather call it just a Lydian, which we're going to say is a Y2 modal whole step chord. Now, the Lydian has a blue as the color assigned to it. So we can also name it by, this is the blue chord, but it's got only 3 shades of darkness, right? 3 shades of darkness, blue chord for a 3-note Lydian chord, we can basically call it. Remembering that if you're telling someone that you're playing in Lydian, it'd be nice to tell them the collection of notes based on the major scale, meaning I could say, look, I have the collection of notes like the Nashville number system does based on the major scale of the C major, but the tonic is going to be the Lydian, which we can then indicate with the chord by having a capital Y when we express the chord, so that we can say that's going to be the tonic chord. Now you could say that we're playing in F Lydian without expressing that we're in the collection of notes around the C major. You can derive it using the Lydian formula, but it's a little bit not as nice kind of to do that, because then again, there's a whole bunch of different ways you're deriving the same 12 crayon boxes, right? They're all the same 12 crayon boxes. It would be nice if we told them one way to get there, and then we, as a convention, right, and then we tell you which one is the tonic. But whatever, in any case, we're going to call this a 4-6-1 modal points, which is Lydian, Aeolian, Ionian, which means we can call this then a YI modal range chord, or it can be a blue to a yellow-green modal range chord, or we could just call it by the YI modal range chord as this blue is this shade of blue, or if we labeled each point of the distances, we can label it by blue to yellow-green, right? And then if we add another one, it would be an F major 7. So that still looks like similar to the Ionian. So I'd rather call it a 4-note Lydian chord, or a Lydian for 3 modal whole steps. Dropping the F would be a Lydian 3 modal whole step chord, which has a range of 4 to a 3, which was the Lydian to the Phrygian. We take every other note, which we could call a blue to sky blue chord, or we could call it a 4-3 with this shades of blue, right? This shade of blue, if we have it all in one cell, or a YP modal range chord, or this shades of blue modal range chord, right? So it's all the same from the color standpoint. The color standpoint has to be based on kind of this convention, 4-note Lydian chord, because it's a 4 shade of darkness blue, which is based on the Lydian note. In any case, what if we have an F major 9 chord? So now we have an F major 9. So again, I'd rather call it something around the node. So something like a 5-note Lydian chord, which could then be the blue, which would be the 5 shades of darkness blue chord, right? Or it would be, you could call it a Lydian F4 chord, but the F's redundant, just a Lydian 4 chord. The range then is going to be 4 to 5, or Lydian to Mixolydian. So you could call the range then the blue magenta modal range chord, or again, just call it the 5 shades of darkness blue chord as the full thing. All right, so then if we do the next one, it would be an F major sharp 11, because that's the one that has the interval difference for the Lydian than the major, so we need an extension to it. But still, I'd rather call it a 6-note Lydian or 6 shades of blue Lydian chord. 6 shades of blue chord, right? We could just call it 6 shades of blue, the sixth shade of blue chord, and could name it by the blue color. And so it's going to be a Lydian F5 chord, but the F is redundant. If we already know it, I'd rather just call it a Lydian 5 modal whole step chord. 5 times 10, 5 times 2 is 10, or the 11th scale degree, which gets us to the Nashville number 7, which is the Locrian note. So it's a Lydian Locrian, or you could call it a blue-yellow modal range chord. All right, and then finally we have the F major 13 sharp 11, which once again needs an extension. I'd rather call it a 7-note Lydian or the 7th shade of blue chord. And that's going to be, or you can call it a Lydian F6, but the F is redundant, just a Lydian 6 modal whole step. 6 times 2 is 12 modal half steps, which would be the 13th scale degree, getting you to Nashville system number 2, which is the Dorian, which you can call a blue spring green modal range chord. If we look then at distances, looking at distances now, then we say if we go 0 modal half steps up, 1 scale degree up, it would be 0 notes up, which would be flame color. Flame color could be that. The 0 note away perfect first is still flame color. 0 note away from the Lydian node, 0 modal half steps, still flame color. If you go 2 modal half steps up, 3rd scale degree, it's going to be 4 notes up for the Lydian, which is going to be mint color. So you could call that a 4 note away major third, still mint. 4 note away from the Lydian node, 2 modal half steps, still mint color, because the 4 is the thing that's driving the color. That, of course, is the defining distance of a major mode. So we expect it to be the same. If you go 4 modal half steps up, which is the 5th scale degree, we get once again a very stable 7-note distance, which is azure. So you can call it a 7-note away perfect 5th, still azure. 7-note away Lydian 4th modal half step, still azure. If we go 6 modal half steps up, 7th scale degree, it's going to be 11 notes up, which is a major 7, which is only found in 2 out of the 3 major modes and not at all in any of the other modes of the minor or the Locrian, and that's going to be the Ionian and the Lydian. So we're going to give that 11 distance the color of punch. So 11 note away major 7, still punch. 11 note away Lydian's 6th modal half step, still punch color. What if we go 8 notes up, which would be the 9th scale degree? 8 modal half steps up, 9th scale degree would be 2 notes up, or 2 plus 12, but it's going to have a local distance of 2, which has a local color of chartreuse. So you could call that a 2 note away major 2nd, or 2 note away major 9, still chartreuse. 2 note away from the Lydian node, 8 modal half steps, still chartreuse. So if we go 10 modal half steps up, 11th scale degree, it will be 6 notes up. That's the crazy distance. That's the weird one. Right across the clock, 12/6. It's electric sky, because you get electrocuted with that one. So we can call that, now this should be called a 6-note away augmented 4th, or augmented 11th, but because of the formulas, I'm always calling it a diminished 5th, 2 names for the same note, so just be aware of that. And you could call it a 6-note away from the Lydian 10 modal half step. It's still going to be electric sky. If we go 12 modal half steps up, 13th scale degree, it's going to be 9 notes up, or 9 plus 12, but the local distance, 9 notes up, has a local color of orchid. So a 9 note away major 6, or a 9 note away major 13, orchid. 9 note away Lydian 12 modal half step, orchid color. Okay, so then these are the color systems if we show them by the note colors. So this is not going to be the same as our chord color system, because the chord color system is based on the colors for kind of like the Nashville number system, which is based on C major, right? So if I look at everything from an independent color by note, then those colors will change in a similar fashion as our analogy as the planet moving around, but now we're looking at like the grid as though it's off the planet from space, right? So you could look at it this way, but we can show this then by color system by basically note, but then you have to memorize the colors for which will be different for each collection of 12 collections of 7 notes. Whereas if you remember the relative color system similar to the Nashville number idea, then you'll have the same set of colors for all relative positions for all 12 collections of 7 notes. Now, if we put this into our bucket, then you can see that they match what we have for the Ionian. That's why these are subsumed by these ones up top in our combined table, but then the extensions get pulled out here. So when we put these tables together, what happens? These disappear, get subsumed by these, and then you only see the blue popping out with these extensions because it gets out of whack when you have a different interval from the major scale, which happens to happen on the 11th, which is equivalent to the 4 because it has that augmented fourth, which is the crazy 6 note away distance. Okay, so let's go to the next one. So if we got Mixolydian, so Mixolydian, a G major looks the same as, I don't know if that G major is Ionian. If I just saw a G major, you don't know if it's Ionian or Lydian or Mixolydian. You would assume one of those 3. It would be nicer to list it by point. I'd rather call it a 3-note Mixolydian, or we know that the Mixolydian node is magenta. So it's the third shades of magenta chord, the third shade of magenta chord, right? We can call it a Mixolydian G2 chord, but the G is redundant if we know the notes. We can call it just a Mixolydian 2 modal whole step chord. If the Mixolydian is the root, you can make the X capital to say this is the tonic. Again, I would rather say the collection of notes is the 7-note collection derived from the C major, and this happens to be then the related Mixolydian, but then we're going to focus on the Mixolydian as the tonic by possibly capitalizing it here. You could just say, look, we're playing in G Mixolydian or whatever you're playing in, that's fine, but but again, it's making people have to determine the crayon box. They're looking at different shelves to figure out the crayon box, right? When there's really only 12 sets of crayons. So it'd be easier to have a convention that tells you which set of crayons, right? Right. Okay. Anyway, so we can call that a 5-7-2 or a Mixolydian Locrian Dorian chord. The endpoints are going to be the 5-2, so you can call it a 5-2 modal range chord, a Mixolydian Dorian modal range chord, or by color, you can call it a Mixolydian Spring Green modal range chord. So what if we add another one? This is where the Mixolydian gets out of whack because the 7 has a minor 7, so all of the rest of them will be different than the normal major construction. We just could shorten them with a 7. So a G7, or just the letter and the number, but it still has the G. I'd rather drop the G and name it by relative position, calling it a 4-note Mixolydian, or just the 4th shade of gray Mixolydian chord. I mean, just the 4th shade of gray magenta chord, right? 4th shade of magenta chord. Sorry, 4th shade of magenta chord. That's it. So we could call it a Mixolydian G3 modal half-step chord, but the G is redundant. I'd rather just call it a Mixolydian 3 modal whole step chord. The 3 times 2 would be 6 modal half steps, which would be the 7th scale degree, resulting in the Nashville number point of 4, which is Lydian, which means you could call it an XY Mixolydian Lydian modal range, or a magenta blue modal range chord. So if we add another one, that's just going to be G9, but the G is still not allowing us to transpose it. I'd rather call it a 5-note Mixolydian chord, or the 5th shade of magenta chord. 5th shade of magenta chord. We could then just call it a Mixolydian G4, but the G is redundant. Just a Mixolydian 4, or 4 modal whole step. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 plus 1 gives me the 9th scale degree, which lands us to the endpoint, which is Aeolian. So we could call it a Mixolydian Aeolian or magenta Aeolian modal range chord.